Have you ever walked away from a conversation replaying it for hours? Not because you were wrong, but because someone completely misunderstood who you are. They twisted your intentions, ignored your explanation, reduced your entire character to one moment, one mistake, one opinion. And somehow, even after the conversation ended, they were still living in your head. Most people think suffering comes from rejection, criticism, or betrayal. But the Stoics believed something far more disturbing. A huge portion of human suffering comes from the desperate need to be understood. Think about that. Entire friendships collapse because two people need the other person to finally get them. Relationships become emotional prisons because one person keeps saying, "You just don't understand me." Social media has turned millions of people into unpaid PR managers for their own identity, constantly explaining, clarifying, defending, correcting. And the terrifying part is this. No matter how hard you explain yourself, some people will never see you clearly. Not because you failed, but because they are seeing you through the lens of their own fears, ego, jealousy, trauma, expectations, and assumptions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "People exist for one another. Teach them or bear with them." But modern life has convinced us that everyone must validate us emotionally before we can feel at peace. That's why so many people are exhausted. They are fighting psychological wars inside the minds of strangers. And tonight, I want to show you something ancient philosophers discovered thousands of years ago that most people still never realize. The moment you stop needing everyone to understand you, you become dangerous in the best possible way. There's a brutal psychological fact researchers have studied for years called the illusion of transparency. It means human beings massively overestimate how clearly other people can understand their emotions, intentions, and internal state. In one study from Cornell University, people believed others could easily detect when they were nervous, lying, embarrassed, or emotional. But observers almost never noticed. In other words, your inner world feels loud to you, but invisible to everyone else. And that creates one of the deepest frustrations in human life. Because internally, you know your motives. You know your pain. You know how much you cared, how hard you tried, how much you sacrificed. But externally, people only see fragments, a few actions, a few words, a few moments taken out of context. Epictetus warned about this exact trap nearly 2,000 years ago. He said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" That line is cold, but hidden inside it is freedom. The Stoics understood something modern people resist with every fiber of their being. Your reputation is not fully under your control. Never was, never will be. And the more desperately you chase universal understanding, the more emotionally enslaved you become. Leave a like if that hits deeper than you expected already, because this is where things start changing for people mentally. A few years ago, a man named Christopher Thomas Knight became famous for something bizarre. He disappeared into the woods of Maine and lived completely alone for 27 years without speaking to almost anyone. Now, obviously, the Stoics were not telling people to vanish into forests and become hermits. But what fascinated psychologists was what Knight later said after returning to society. He described how silence stripped away the constant need to perform an identity for others. No explaining himself, no defending opinions, no trying to control how people perceived him. Just existence itself. And while isolation has its dangers, his story exposed something uncomfortable about modern society. Many people are mentally exhausted from constantly managing perceptions. Think about how much energy people waste trying to edit themselves into something acceptable. They rehearse texts before sending them, rewrite comments, overanalyze conversations from 3 days ago. They lose sleep because someone might have taken it the wrong way. The Stoics saw this as a form of self-imposed imprisonment. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and nowhere is that truer than in social perception." Most people are not suffering because others misunderstand them. They are suffering because they cannot stop trying to correct every misunderstanding. That's a huge difference. And here's where it gets darker. Sometimes people do understand you and still choose to judge you unfairly. That's the part nobody wants to hear. We like believing that if we just explain ourselves perfectly enough, people will finally become reasonable. But history destroys that fantasy. Socrates was sentenced to death despite spending his life teaching wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, one of the wisest rulers in history, was mocked constantly during his reign. Nikola Tesla died largely misunderstood and isolated despite helping shape the modern world. Human beings do not automatically reward truth, depth, or good intentions. Sometimes they reward confidence, simplicity, tribal loyalty, or emotional convenience. The Stoics accepted this early. They knew public opinion changes like weather. One moment people praise you, the next they condemn you. That's why Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself not to value applause too highly. Because the crowd cheering you today may hate you tomorrow for the exact same qualities. If you build your emotional stability on being understood, your peace becomes dependent on unstable minds. And that is one of the weakest foundations possible. But there's another side to this that almost nobody talks about. Sometimes your obsession with being understood is actually ego disguised as vulnerability. That sounds harsh, but stay with me. Wanting connection is human. Wanting love is human. But demanding that everyone fully grasp your complexity? That's impossible. You barely understand yourself half the time. Your personality changes across years. Your beliefs evolve. Your emotions contradict each other. Yet people torture themselves expecting flawless psychological recognition from others who are also confused human beings trying to survive life. The Stoics constantly trained themselves to separate what they wished reality was from what reality actually is. Reality is this: people will misunderstand your silence as arrogance, your confidence as ego, your boundaries as cruelty, your kindness as weakness, your ambition as selfishness, your pain as attention-seeking. And if you spend your life chasing universal agreement, you will emotionally collapse trying to carry impossible expectations. Halfway through this video, I just want to say something directly to you. If these videos make you feel understood in a world that often feels emotionally chaotic, subscribe and join this community. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers. And honestly, this channel is becoming something rare online. A place where people can think deeper, slow down, and reconnect with ancient wisdom without all the fake guru nonsense. And comment below. What's one thing people constantly misunderstand about you? I read the comments carefully, and you'd be surprised how many people are carrying the exact same invisible frustrations. Now here's the paradox that changed my perspective completely. The moment you stop demanding understanding from everyone, people often understand you more. Why? Because desperation distorts behavior. Think about someone trying too hard to convince others they're intelligent, good-hearted, successful, misunderstood, deep, or authentic. It creates tension. But people who are grounded internally move differently. They explain less, defend less, panic less. They allow misunderstanding to exist without emotionally combusting. And that calmness creates gravity. Epictetus taught that if someone forms a false impression of you, the real issue is not the opinion itself, but your attachment to controlling it. That idea sounds simple until you try living it. Imagine being criticized online and not spiraling. Imagine someone judging your character and you not obsessively drafting mental defense speeches for 6 hours. Imagine not needing every family member, co-worker, or stranger to validate your identity before you can sleep peacefully. That is psychological freedom, rare freedom. And this doesn't mean becoming cold or emotionally disconnected. Stoicism has been badly misunderstood as emotional suppression. But real Stoicism is emotional discipline. The Stoics loved deeply. They valued friendship, loyalty, justice, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius constantly wrote about patience and understanding. But they refused to hand strangers the keys to their internal peace. Modern culture does the opposite. It trains people to outsource self-worth to external reactions. Likes, comments, approval, validation, recognition. Algorithms have turned human insecurity into a business model. Every notification becomes a tiny emotional referendum on your value. That's why anxiety rates are exploding globally. According to the World Health Organization, anxiety disorders affect hundreds of millions of people worldwide, and social comparison has become one of the strongest psychological stressors in the digital age. The Stoics would look at modern society and immediately recognize the problem. People have become emotionally dependent on forces they cannot control. So what do you actually do with this wisdom practically? Start here. The next time someone misunderstands you, resist the urge to immediately over-explain yourself. Pause. Observe the discomfort. Most people cannot tolerate being misperceived for even a few minutes. But that discomfort is revealing an attachment. Second, ask yourself whether clarification is truly useful, or whether you're just trying to emotionally force someone into validating your self-image. Third, remember that people interpret reality through their own internal world. A bitter person sees insults everywhere. An insecure person sees threats everywhere. A dishonest person suspects deception everywhere. Their interpretation is not always a reflection of you. Sometimes it's a confession about them. And finally, build a life so grounded in personal values that misunderstanding no longer destabilizes your identity. The Stoics focused obsessively on character because character survives opinion. Reputation changes. Character remains. I want to leave you with one final thought. Somewhere in your life right now, there is probably a person who has completely misunderstood you. Maybe they think you're weak when you're exhausted. Maybe they think you're arrogant when you're guarded. Maybe they think you don't care when you've simply stopped begging for reciprocity. And maybe you've been carrying the weight of that misunderstanding for months or even years. But listen carefully. Your peace cannot depend on correcting every distorted perception people have of you. That battle never ends. The Stoics discovered that true freedom begins when you stop trying to control minds you do not own. You do not need universal understanding to live a meaningful life. You need self-respect, discipline, inner clarity, purpose, and the courage to let some people misunderstand you while you continue moving forward anyway. Because in the end, the strongest people are not the ones who convince everyone. They are the ones who remain steady even when they cannot. If this video spoke to something real inside you, leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. And remember this the next time you feel misunderstood. Not everyone has the eyes to see you clearly, and that's okay. Your job is not to shrink yourself into something easier to explain. Your job is to become someone real enough that misunderstanding no longer controls your peace.